In this lesson, we are going to learn about the exception handling. I'm going to create a new project and going to call this project as a exception demo. Press OK. So I'm going to add it to the current solution. In this application, we are going to list 3 fruits and ask the user to select the fruit and the quantity they buy, and when they press the button it should show them the total cost. So I'm going to put a list box that's going to display all the fruits. So in the items collection we will add some fruits. So 1 apple, 2 orange, 3 banana, and press OK. So we have these 3 items and we are going to ask the user to enter the ID. ID is 1, 2 or 3, and we are going to ask them to enter the quantity, how much quantity they are going to buy. And for both we are going to place a text box. So we'll put a text box for the ID and another text box is for the quantity, and we'll add one more label to display the total. And this could be a label also, because the user is not going to enter anything. So at the beginning we put 0. So we are going to add a button, and I'm going to call this as calculate price or calculate total, and we could give a name for this. We'll name this as BTN total, and the first text box we can name it as txt id, and the second text box we can name it as txt quantity qty. Now when user click on this button, first thing we need to get the id. So int I, so I equals to text id dot text. So if you notice, this will give us an error because text is a string and I is a integer. So you cannot assign a string to an integer. We need to convert the string to integer. So the easier way we will use is int dot parse. So this will parse the given string into a text, into a integer. Now we got the I. If I is equals to 1, that means if the user have selected the different product, I'm going to set the price of each product. If it is 1, that is apple, so I'm going to give the price as 10. If I is 2, that is orange, then the price would be 8. Otherwise the price will be 2. we have declared the get what is the number, index number they give, and we set what is the price of the item, and then we need to calculate the total. So I will add one more variable, total. So that, and one more, another variable is quantity. So we'll read the quantity from the second text, txt quantity dot text, and we will calculate the total as quantity times price. And we want to display this in the label, so the result is going to be displayed in this label, which is label 4. Maybe we will rename this label 4 as LBL result or LBL total. So here we are going to put LBL total dot text is the total amount. Again, this will give us an error because total is an integer and our text is a string. We need to convert this to string. We use the method toString. So it's very simple code. We read what is the item they have chosen, and based on the item we set the price and get the quantity and calculate the total quantity times price and display the total. Yes, I'll execute this code. So I'm going to choose number 2, which is orange, and I say 5. So if you remember, the price of orange we set as 8. So and the quantity I'm going to buy is 5. So 5 8s are 40. So the total will be 40. If I give 1 and press total, I'll get 50. Right. Now what will happen if I enter the value as, instead of number I press ONE. So if I try to click on the button, our program crash and it unexpectedly stopped the program. So if you see here, it says input string was not in a correct format. So we are trying to convert the string to integer, but the string we give is a character. So character cannot be converted as an integer. So your program stopped or crashed at the middle. So we don't want this to happen to the end user. If the user does not give the right format, then I want the program to tell an error and stop smoothly. So for this one, we can have a exception handling. Exception handling is to handle the unexpected errors in your code. How do we do the exception handling? The block that you think where error could occur, you put them in a keyword called try. So try block, I'm going to put this whole code in a try. So this is a piece of code where errors could occur. So I put whole of this in a try, and we use the keyword called catch to catch the exception that's thrown by this code. So there are many types of exceptions available in C#, and if you don't know the exact exception name, you could put it as a common exception. So exception, and create an object ex, and I want to display the message of this exception. So I'm using a message box to display the message of this exception. Ex is a exception object. Dot message contains the message of this exception. So that's a default message of this exception. So now if I execute this code, if I give 1 and quantity is 2 and press calculate total, it's fine. One apple is 10 and I'm going to buy 2 apples, so it is 20. But instead of this, when I give 1 and press total, now you can see here, instead of the program stops or crash, it pop a message box and the message displays input string was not a correct format. So let us try to give a control break here and see what type of exception it is throwing. So when I press calculate total, so this line is going to execute, and if you notice, this is going to throw a exception. When I move step over, you see here, from this line it skip all this line and go to the catch exception, and this is going to throw a exception. So if you click on this button here, you see what type of exception it's throwing. Format exception. So you can also give the exact exception what it is throwing. Instead of you make it as a general, you can make it as a exact exception what is throwing. So instead of exception, I can make this as format exception. Yes. Now I will remove this control break. If you click on that red button, it will remove the control break. So now I will execute, and when I give 1 and quantity is 2 and press calculate total, I get the same error, but this time it's not general exception, it goes to this particular exception, and the message I can make it as a customized message. So I can tell that kindly enter digit only. So when I execute this, and if the user trying to give a number as a character, then I will get the message kindly enter digits only. Now I also want to display, instead of just the total, I want to display the name of the item with the total. So apple price is something like that. Create a string that will store the name of the product, and when the user enters the product, I'm going to store the name of the product. Product will be, our product is in the list box 1 dot items, and within the square bracket you give the item index. The index of the items always start with 0. That means the first item will be 0, second item will be 1, third item will be 2, and user enter will be 1 2 3. But when you want to take the index of the item, you need to convert into I minus 1. The minus 1 is because when the user wants to take the first item, he will give 1, but the actual index of the first item is 0. So 1 minus 1 will become 0. So I need to convert this object to a string. So we will convert this to a string. So the product will store the name of the item they have selected. So in this text, I'm going to display actual the product and price. Product total is with the total. Now let's say when I execute this, and if a user gives 2 and 2, that means user are selecting the product orange and he is going to buy 2 oranges. So when you press total, it says 2 orange, total is 16. 2 is the number 2 here. So this is not the 2 mentioned here. For example, when I give 4, 2 orange, total is 32. 2 means when you take the item, it takes the whole text here, including the ID. Now what happens when I give 0? We don't have a 0 item. If I try to give 0, then it will try to go and take the 0 minus 1 item, which is -1, but our first item is 0. So when I press on the calculate, the program stops unexpectedly, and you see here what exception it throws: argument out of range exception. Even though we have an exception already here, but this is for only for the format exception, but the new exception it throws is a argument out of range exception. So we need to try to catch all the exceptions that could occur. So this time I'm going to argument out of range exception, and I'm going to give message box dot show ID must be 1 to 3. So when the user gives a ID which is less than 1 or more than 3, our argument will be out of range and this exception will be called. So when I execute, now let's I give 0 and 1, press total. You see here ID must be only 1 to 3. If I give 1, then I will get the total. If I give 4, I'll get this message, and if I give 4, then my message is different. So you can see that for every error it has a different messages. So format exception, when the user does not enter the right format. Argument out of range exception is when the ID is not within the range, the index is not within the range. And as I told you, if you don't know what type of exception is going to happen, just you can add a exception to catch any exception other than these two. Let us think about these are all the system exceptions: format exception, argument out of exception, and the exception. Now I want to have a customized exception. For example, the user enters 2 and he is trying to give a number as -2 as a quantity. When they press calculate total, my total will be in negative. Now I want to restrict the user not to give any negative or 0 value. The quantity must be always more than 0. We don't have a system exception to handle this. So instead of this, we can create our own exception. So what we do here, when the user enter the quantity, if the quantity is less than 1, that means it's not a valid quantity. I don't want to do all these things, so I'm going to throw a exception. So first keyword we use is try, the second keyword is to catch the exception, and now is to throw a customized exception. So you give a keyword throw. So I'm going to throw a new exception, and within the bracket you give a message for this exception. So my message is quantity must be more than 0. Now Now let me save this one and run this. So if the user enter 2 and if user enters 0 and press calculate, so you can see here error occurred, quantity must be more than 0. This is because when my quantity is less than 1, it's going to throw a new exception, and the message of this exception is quantity more than 0. So it go for the catch. This is not a format exception, this is not argument out of range exception, so it goes to the third one, which is exception, and the message in this exception is the message we have passed here. So error occurred, the message is quantity must be more than 0. So this way you can throw your own exceptions. So exception handling is to handle the unhandled errors in your code.